Welcome to DrJLT Economics. I'm Dr. DrJLT. In today's episode, I want to talk about the two feedback loops that connect a weak economy, stimulate packages, and asset bubbles. There are basically a small feedback loop between a weak economy and more stimulate, and a bigger feedback loop with all three of them. So let's start with the small feedback loop. Suppose you start with a weak economy. And when the economy is weak, I think traditionally we'll think about how you could, there are a list of things that you could do. You could let some inefficient companies to fail, and you could invest in new technologies and encourage new companies with more efficient production methods to come about. And of course, at the same time, you need to cut your spending so that you can have a more balanced economic situation that reflects the weak economy and weaker production. And but what has been happening is that especially in Western economies, is that a lot of countries, people just are very adverse to the idea that inefficient companies should fail, that a lot of money should be wasted on R&D, or that they should cut down their standard of living. They want to keep everything as it is without taking any sacrifices to overcome a weaker economy. And so the idea to deal with this was to come up with stimulate packages and quantitative easing. And essentially what this does is that on the one hand, a lot of money is created, and this money are given to banks, which are also made available, and thereby made available to large corporations. And at the same time, the governments will just increase their spending and start to borrow more, which a lot of these borrowing are basically monetized by their central banks via money printing. Right. So this is the stimulus. Now, why is it that stimulus does not work and actually cause the economy weaker? And this is the first feedback loop, right? And this is a fundamental thing, because the idea that if the stimulate those stimulate packages, if the stimulations or whatever, if they really help, or relief bill, whatever it's called, if they really help improve the economy, then there would not have been this feedback relationship. It would cure the weak economy, and everything will be better. But of course, before we go to why, we can first assert that there is a feedback loop, because we are seeing that since the Western economies started to get on the stimulate dependency, they had to have increasing amount of stimulants, right? Increasing amount of drugs, basically. They need to take more drugs, and they need to take it more frequently. And at the same time, the economy remains weak. And so obviously it does not work. And why is it that these stimulations don't work? Well, these stimulations don't work because they do not allow inefficient companies to go bankrupt or be rearranged. They encourages these inefficient companies, because these inefficient companies, let's be honest, tend to be some of the biggest companies, and these biggest companies have the best access to all the stimulate money. So they get zero interest or negative interest even loans. So so they take up a lot of debt and they keep their company running. But all the time they are running inefficiently and they are being rewarded for being run inefficiently. And of course, when this situation is sustained, the economy cannot be better. At the same time, because these inefficient companies, so-called zombie companies, they take up all the space, making it impossible, making it more difficult for more efficient small companies or new companies, new entrepreneurs to make it. Right? They occupy the market space, and because of these stimulations or whatever stimulants, they have these negative interest, zero interest or negative interest loans. With these loans, of course, they cannot outcompete more efficient companies, because they don't need to be efficient in order to compete with inefficient companies. And as a result, efficient companies cannot come about, and big inefficient companies just keep on going and going, and slowly zombifying the entire economy of a country. And of course, at the same time, worse still, when there is more stimulation after stimulation, there is basically money printing and inflation. And these inflation also makes it more costly for new companies to start. And of course, all these things are really bad. And of course, thirdly, as I mentioned from the very beginning, the good ways, the right ways that you deal with weak economy, right? The third way is to cut down spending. Now, with all the stimulations, the government, whatever, helps, people are not cutting down their spending, even though the economy is bad and the production is bad. So what happens is that they import a lot of stuff, and while at the same time they don't produce a lot of stuff, and this increases the trade deficit, where at the same time does not provide the reservoir of pent-up demand that will help an economy recover once it is put onto the right leg. Right. So with these reasons, the more stimulation, the more stimulate packages there are, the more it's needed, and the weaker the economy is. So that's the first feedback loop. Now let's go to the second, bigger feedback loop. So we know that weaker economy leads to more stimulants, right? And this stimulations. And this basically a lot of it goes to the stock market. We know for matter of fact that and this has been talked about. I say it's matter of fact because it's been talked about by, I think, Alan Greenspan even. So it's not someone that it's not something that I made it up. Basically, the matter of fact is that when the central bank prints money, over 90% of this money goes to the asset market. That is because, there are many different ways, right? But eventually all goes to asset market, goes to the rich. It does not go to poor people. There are many different ways that this happens. For example, when you monetize loans for the basically you monetize loans all through zero and negative interest loans for corporations. What happens is that these corporations, with this money, a lot of this borrowed money has been used to speculate on assets. And we have seen a large amount of stock buybacks, and it has been touted as a way to reward the shareholders, because traditionally, in order to justify the stock prices, the share prices, what happens is that the companies make an income, and this income is paid to their shareholders in the form of dividends. Now, a lot of these companies, because the economy is so bad, because they are not making money, what they do is they make loans, and then they use these loans to buy back their own stocks, and in the process push up the stock prices, and this causes this is a form of reward for their shareholders, even though the company is not making money, and this pushes up the share prices. So this is one way that it happens. And of course, there's also in the housing bubble and all the credit bubbles, because when you have at the beginning, let's say a stock market bubble. The stock market bubble is basically an asset bubble, and these assets will just overflow to other areas, because the more asset you have, the more asset these rich people will be able to use as collaterals to make loans, and so they can buy more assets, and as that assets basically purchased on loan, as the nominal price of that asset increases in price, that on that margin the guy can make another loan. So there's so this eventually creates a lot of bubbles everywhere, right? This is only one of the ways, and I think certainly there are other ways, so I'm not going to go into these details. But the matter of fact is that when you create these stimulate packages through money printing, what happens is necessarily an increase in the asset bubble, in asset prices, and this creates asset bubbles. We have seen some tech companies which are not profitable, and this is, I think, some of the most ridiculous things that has been happening especially in the United States, is that a lot of these big tech companies are not profitable, and yet they have very high share prices. And some of them are marginally profitable, and their PEs are over 1,000 times, right? Normally, a reasonable PE is around 15 times, 10 to 20 times. 20 is a bit high. So 1,000 times means that if this company pays dividends, it takes what? 1,000 years for you to recuperate to get through dividends the share prices. Obviously, this is not justified by value, right? The PE is a way of measure the value, because the value of a share of a stock can only be justified by the income that it generates. If it does not generate income, it does not deliver a value. But of course, this is completely ignored in a big bubble, and this currently what we have here is a big bubble. Now the last leg of this this bigger loop is, we already said that weaker economy leads to more stimulates, and this stimulates will also lead to a bigger asset bubble. Now, asset bubble will also cause the economy to be weaker. This is the last leg. And why is it so? Well, this is because these asset bubbles, as you remember, there are basically two types. I talked about two types of companies: the inefficient big zombie companies, or startups or more efficient companies that cannot be started or cannot make it, right? Those zombie companies in these asset bubbles, what they do, they speculate on asset bubbles. Right, as a result, they use most of their resources, a significant portion, let's say, of their resources in speculating in financial markets, and they do not produce. They do not create value, because that's just asset bubble is just price, no value. In fact, the more you spend money on that, and the less you spend money on production, the less value you create. So even though the asset prices go up, the value that's behind these stocks, these assets actually come down. So that's one way, one side of it. On the other side, because asset bubble becomes bigger and bigger, asset prices keeps increasing, it is very difficult for new companies, for entrepreneurs to start companies that could be more efficient. Because suppose you want to open a factory, all the asset prices, all the real estate has been speculated to such a degree, you cannot afford to rent the space to open your factory, or it costs too much to rent the space. So the company that could be efficient will not be possible because of the increasing asset bubbles, right? Similar dynamics happens a lot in a lot of different ways. I'm just trying to give a simple example. So basically this happens is that we complete the bigger feedback loop. So in sum, there are two feedback loops. One is that we have a weak economy, and then we don't want to make the hard work to recover from a hard economy, a weak economy, by letting some inefficient companies fail and encourage new efficient companies to start, and in the process we spend a bit less. We don't want to do that, but instead we want to print money. We want to keep being high, and this actually leads to a weaker economy. That's the small feedback loop. The bigger feedback loop is that when we have a weak economy and then a lot of stimulants, these stimulants will actually go to blow up asset prices, asset bubbles, and these asset bubbles will cause the economy to be weaker, because zombified companies will speculate on the asset prices, while more efficient startups just simply cannot make it because of these rising asset prices. All right, so thank you for listening. I want to announce a piece of news, which is that I have added a natural language processing based program to my website, Newfiliac, NEOFILIAC.com, newfiliac.com. And with this, basically what it does is that it analyzes third-party reviews and generates a review report that I think is going to be very interesting for a lot of consumers. So I encourage you to check that out. Thanks. Have a great day.